Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. Today, I thought I would talk to you about artificial intelligence, risks and benefits, and also talk about my career trajectory. This is a talk directed towards the youth of India, but also probably more broadly relevant for all audiences. Thank you so much again. I will just quickly share my screen. So, what is the history of AI? Artificial intelligence did not start just 50 years back or 70 years back. It actually goes back many hundreds and even a few thousand years. This really has roots in mankind's quest to understand nature and mimic nature. Ever since we have seen birds fly, we've always wanted to fly ourselves. And we always wanted to mimic how birds fly so that someday we could also fly. There's a picture, a small sketch made by Leonardo da Vinci many hundreds of years back, looking at a putative flying machine. Now, he modeled it on the wings of birds because he thought that ultimately, if someday we have flying machines, they will look like birds. They will have wings, and the wings would flutter, and that's how we would ultimately take flight. Then finally, we had computing machines. We wanted to replicate how we compute numbers and how we calculate numbers. Uh, Previously, we were using pen and paper, but then we started getting ever more sophisticated tools. My father once showed to me a slide rule. It is not used at all nowadays, but growing up, when I saw that piece of wood, which looked like a scale or a ruler, I just fell in love with it. You could calculate logarithms with it, and you could do all kinds of computations with it. And before mechanical computers came along, slide rules were used by engineers to calculate numbers and do calculations. Then later in the 1950s and 40s, these kinds of machines came along where you could turn a crank and then certain numbers or computations, addition, subtraction, multiplication could be done. Artificial intelligence is really a quest to take the next step, that is, mimic what is going on in our brains. In our brains, we have neurons, and the idea, at least early on in the 1940s, was that if we study these neurons, then we can mimic intelligence that is in our brains. And the first step was in the 1950s, somebody invented what's called the perceptron. So the perceptron was a mechanical analog of the neuron. And similar to how the human brain sort of using the eye takes in some visual scenes and then interprets this using neurons, the perceptron would take in, using a camera, it would capture an image, and then there would be electrical circuits that would interpret that and give a certain output. This was similar to a biological neuron, and it was called a perceptron. Central to this whole endeavor is a quest for humans to answer this simple question: can machines think? I will just pause for a few seconds and let you reflect on it. Please remember that this is a very deep question and one that has no right or wrong answer. This question can be rephrased as, can a submarine swim? In fact, the computer scientist Edgar Dijkstra once said that the question of whether a computer can think is no more interesting than the question of whether a submarine can swim. The implication being that Yes, machines can think, but they think differently to the way that we humans think. Just as a submarine, does a submarine swim? Yes and no. I mean, a submarine goes through water, but it does not swim in the same sense that a fish swims. So I think what Edgar Dijkstra was saying here is that yes, machines can think, but that thinking, quote unquote, is very different to what and how humans think. Those are not the same things. Those are fundamentally different kinds of intelligence. This is a question that will occupy us for many decades, possibly centuries. But in the meantime, artificial intelligence is coming out with new applications and is really revolutionizing our world. Current trends are deep learning, generative AI. There are lots of applications in healthcare, finance, autonomous systems, drones, what have you. I wanted to quickly talk about some of the risks of AI. There are different ethical considerations that one needs to think about. For example, the ethics of using data. What kind of bias does this data have? If we use an AI model that's trained on historical data to select a new candidate or a new employee in a company, there could be some bias in that data. That data might have historical biases against women or certain ethnic minorities or certain other socioeconomically disadvantaged people. So we need to take account of that bias and not blindly trust an AI algorithm. There are data privacy issues. Is the data private? And have we taken the consent of individuals whose data it is? What is the impact on jobs? In the 18th century, when the Industrial Revolution first started, there were a group of people in the UK who were called the Luddites. They vehemently protested against the Industrial Revolution, suggesting that the Industrial Revolution will take away jobs. What ended up happening was that, yes, certain jobs were taken away, but more jobs were created. The creation of the steam engine led to the railways. The railways led to better transportation. That led to people with increased mobility, created new jobs in coal mines and steel factories and global trade. So the number of jobs created was more than the number of jobs that were lost. There are also systemic effects on our planet that AI can have. I will have more to share on that in the next slide. And there is the risk of anthropomorphizing. That is, seeing everything as human-like. For example, if I see ChatGPT or chat with it, it feels like I'm talking with a human. But it is really a human tendency to cast everything in human terms. And this is a fundamental mistake that all humans make. We always see our image in others. That is, we anthropomorphize our world. Naturally, we think just revolves around us. However, it is not so. This is an art installation in the US. This this very creative art installation called The Anatomy of an AI actually talks about the risks that AI systems can pose. It starts off with a very simple device called Alexa, which is Amazon's device that just sits on your desktop or somewhere in your room and is waiting for your instructions. For example, you can ask it to, hey, Alexa, can you please tell me how to get from here to the train station? Or can you please order something on Deliveroo or something on Flipkart? And it will do that for you. Something very helpful and innocuous, but what kind of risks does it pose to our society? If we really think about the simple device and think systemically and systematically about its entire life cycle, then we see there are many risks. For example, there are computer chips within it. And if we have a billion smartphones, I think we have more than a billion smartphones now, each has a computer chip, and that needs silicon and lithium. These are rare metals. And in order to mine, for example, lithium is usually mined in sort of poorer parts of the world, for example, Bolivia. And there is great risk of exploitation of sort of people in those poor parts of the planet. When lithium is mined, these people may be forced to work in these sort of mines, and there is risk of exploitation of human labor. There is also big environmental pollution that goes on. Lithium mining involves lots of toxic chemicals. These end up leaching into our environment and can and do indeed harm our environment. As this device is shipped, let's move into another area. This little device sitting in your room is not the only part of the system. It is communicating over Wi-Fi or internet through massive servers. And these are situated in server farms. These consume massive amounts of electricity and water, again, producing lots of environmental impact. They also rely on a lot of data, which is shown in this part here. How is the data processed? Have we taken care of the privacy of those individuals? These data need to be labeled, and labeling is usually done by human beings, again, working in very poor parts of the world. It might bring livelihood to these people, but it also might expose them to exploitation. Ultimately, these devices need to be shipped to different countries and different locations. Shipping involves a lot of pollution. And lastly, these devices have a certain lifespan. They need to be disposed. If not disposed of properly, they can lead to a lot of environmental waste and environmental pollution. Hence, I argue that the risks from AI are not just Terminators and autonomous drones in warfare. Those are also legitimate concerns and risks. But I argue that the bigger risk and the more short-term risk is sort of the systemic effects of these AI systems when deployed in very large scales. They can have a huge impact on our planet. In the 1700s, there was a Jesuit priest in Italy who worked for the ruling class in Italy. Now, the ruling class in Italy at that point was very rich, and they wanted to sort of keep their subjects in check, and they wanted to listen to what the people in their cities were talking about and what they were doing. So they asked this Jesuit priest to build a device so that they could spy on their citizens. So here is, in this drawing on the left-hand side, you can see this plaza in sort of Middle Ages Italy, or probably during the Renaissance. And in sort of Renaissance Italy, for example, there's this plaza and people are roaming about. This priest created this sort of listening device that was quite innocuous. I mean, it looks like there's a big opening right here, and this sort of snail-like coiling apparatus actually transmits the sound from the plaza into an inner room where the ruling class or the kings actually lived. Through this listening device, the ruling class could actually listen to what the people were talking about in the plaza. So they could essentially surveil their own people. Increasingly, what is happening with AI is that AI, along with smartphones and other portable devices, can be used to sort of do surveillance on us. We are increasingly living in a surveillance state. We are surrounded with CCTV cameras and different other listening devices. They can be used for good. For example, they can be used for our security. They can be used to recommend products that we need. They can be used to build recommender systems. For example, I love to see cat videos, and YouTube knows that and sends me more cat videos, which I like. It keeps me happy. However, it can be used for more sinister purposes. It can be used by governments to sort of do surveillance on citizens and then target certain individuals. Again, a big AI risk. In the 1800s, Europe was going through, naturally, it was past the Renaissance and it was going through a major scientific revolution, sort of during the Industrial Revolution as well. And there was a huge interest in these mechanical devices called automata. So, for example, in France, this person whose last name was Vaucanson came up with this device called a digesting duck. It was a major sensation when it was revealed in France, and people thronged to see it. Here is a fanciful depiction. I mean, there's a cutaway diagram here, but that's not how the machine worked. If you looked at it, you would think that it was actually sort of digesting food and it was doing different things. So here is the duck digesting some food, something is happening inside, and then ultimately poops out something. So you would think that there is some machinery within it that just allows it to mimic exactly how a duck works. It would eat something, and naturally you could hear something's happening inside, and then something would just come out. It would poop, so to speak. But in reality, what was happening was it was an elaborate illusion. There were little pellets that were kept within the duck, and it would just expel these, giving you the illusion that it could, in fact, digest things and poop out. Again, this human quest to sort of mimic nature and get at the fundamental sort of look at the fundamentals of nature and mimic that. Again, in the 1800s, there was a Hungarian person who came up with this device called a mechanical Turk. Now, the mechanical Turk this is actually uh, uh, like a robot who looks like a human being. And there were certain cavities, there were certain gears and complex mechanisms that were at play. And the idea was that you would pay some money and pay to play chess with this person. And frequently people would get beaten by that. And people thought that there was this robot, this automata again, which had human-like intelligence, but which was able to beat human beings in a complex game like chess. Do you think this was real? I mean, you can just think and pause about it, pause the video and think about it, that what could have been going on inside. What really was going on was that there was, even though there was a cavity, there was a real human being was cleverly concealed within it. And that human being could sort of follow the movements made on the chessboard and then give sort of control this robot to sort of make counter moves. So there was a real human being playing within it, giving the illusion that you are actually playing against a robot when actually there was a human being within it. Now, there's a talk on artificial intelligence. Why am I talking about pooping ducks and mechanical automata? But there is actually a link between all of these and AI. And I asked ChatGPT, what is the link? And this is what ChatGPT said, that the digesting duck, mechanical ingenuity, no doubt, but it was really a clever sort of illusion. Just as the duck's digestive process was ultimately a clever illusion, ChatGPT's understanding of language is an impressive simulation rather than true comprehension. Both serve as remarkable examples of their respective eras' technological advancements, pushing the boundaries of what machines can do to emulate natural processes. So again, there is this illusion. We tend to imbue these machines with sort of human-like qualities, and we think they have superhuman qualities, but really that in itself is an illusion. Can you think about a way, though, that ChatGPT, I'm sure some of you have used ChatGPT. Do you think there is a sense in which a human being is actually within ChatGPT? First of all, when you interact with ChatGPT, do you feel you are interacting with a human? You can just think about it, pause the video, and just think about it. There are no right or wrong answers. In reality, in a way, there is sort of a human being within ChatGPT. Even though it is a robotic machine, it has digested, if you will, sort of the sum total of human knowledge that is on the internet. And that knowledge was ultimately produced by humans. So in a sense, there are multiple human beings within ChatGPT. And we are ultimately interacting with sort of a mirror image of ourselves when we interact with ChatGPT. Let's go on to vending machines now. This may seem weird, but this will make sense in a while. Can anybody think about when the first vending machine was invented? Actually, it was invented around the 2nd century BC by somebody named Hero, who lived in the Greek Empire in what is currently Egypt, in a city called Alexandria, which at that point was a major seat of learning. When people would go to these temples to sort of offer worship or worship their gods, what the priests told Hero of Alexandria to construct was a device which could automatically dispense water. So here is a reconstruction of this device. You would put in a coin, and then this device would automatically give you some water. And the idea was that you would just be awestruck when you came face to face with this. You would think that this is some kind of divine intervention, and that it is the gods themselves who are dispensing water. And it had the calculated effect. I mean, if you were going to sort of give sort of worship Zeus or somebody else, you give a coin and then it dispenses some water. You feel it's the gods themselves which are doing it, which naturally gave the priests a huge amount of power over the people. In reality, what was happening was it was one of the first sort of mechanical computers. And as you put in a coin through this machine, as is being done here, in reality, what was happening was that the coin would engage a very simple mechanical device. It would activate a lever, and then it would release some water through a power supply, and the coin would get connected. It was one of the first mechanical computers. Now, why am I talking about vending machines when this is supposed to be a talk about AI? I think there is a big lesson in this for us. Arthur C. Clarke, the great science fiction writer, once said that any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And magic is done by magicians, and the magicians of today are AI scientists and big tech companies who can get into a position of privilege and really abuse that power. Hence, understanding artificial intelligence and opening this black box is really, really important. As students of artificial intelligence and also the common people, they really need to have some deeper understanding of AI than just what is being shown in contemporary media. AI should also not substitute people. I live in the UK, and recently there was a major scandal. The company Fujitsu had actually created an IT system that was in charge of automating some of the work being done in the post office. Unfortunately, this massive IT system or this AI system made a mistake in sort of accounting, and it made an error and suggested that 736 postmasters had actually committed theft or fraud. These postmasters were accused and they were convicted. And nobody thought of actually sort of understanding why the IT system was making this particular prediction. And for many years, these postmasters insisted that they had not committed any crimes. However, their concerns were dismissed and they were charged. The takeaway is that decisions should be made by people, not machines. We should not blindly trust machines. Big tech companies in AI are definitely another risk. They could be a boon as well. They create lots of jobs, especially in India and elsewhere. But too much power is getting concentrated in the hands of a few companies. And we really do not want a repeat of the East India Company, which became so big that it ultimately had its own army, it had its own educational system, and almost ran nation states like India. Some of the future directions that I will talk about in AI are sort of explainable AI and human AI collaboration. Before I get into that, I would like to talk a bit about my journey and personal experiences. My journey in sort of studying computers started almost 25 years back. I initially did not want to study computers, but growing up in India in the late 90s, there was a massive IT boom, and all you could think or hear about in those days was computers. And rather reluctantly, I actually started studying computers. But it's been a great experience. I studied computer technology in India. I studied it was more hardware focused than software. Then I graduated and worked in a company for a few years, worked in large teams, working on finance, mortgage, and banking. And then I went to do a PhD. I did not have any training in sort of biology, but I was quite curious about biological systems, and I ended up doing a PhD in biology, in what now people would call computational biology. And looking back and sort of introspecting, I see that computer science is sort of the new tool for studying biology and the complex world around us. Computers are the new telescopes and the new microscopes. So even though it was weird using computers to study biology, in retrospect, it makes sense because computers are the new tools by which we make sense of the world around us. So my PhD was on infectious diseases in birds like these. Then I started working with clinicians, working on disease prediction, using different kinds of data coming from hospitals and coming from patients. I worked very closely with clinicians and patients. I worked on the gut microbiome. I worked on other diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, trying to make predictions for which medicines might be given to patients to make them feel better. Then I started working on sort of severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia. I worked on an explainable AI model for predicting patients with schizophrenia. This is a screenshot from a paper. Then I've also worked with people with MBAs and supply chain experts and come up with computer models for how supply chains actually work and trying to understand how goods are moved from one part of the city to another. In this case, I worked with companies and people in suits with MBAs. Again, these are all transferable skills. I think a good computer scientist is always looking for different kinds of people to collaborate with. Those could be clinicians or people in supply chains or completely other domains like cell biology, immunology, and virology. Being in computer science really allows you to play in everybody's garden, as a very famous statistician once said. My research and teaching philosophy, which I always preach to others and I practice myself, is work closely with these experts in different fields, build models based on their input, explain these models to them, and then refine their models, but work very closely and collaborate very closely with all these stakeholders. I do not feel I'm in the position to give advice, but to all the young people who are just starting out their degrees in AI or computer science, I have a few pieces of advice. Stay curious. Please work with humans and please work in teams, because artificial intelligence is nothing without human intelligence. We need to work with humans and focus on basic concepts, not buzzwords. I remember when I had started my undergraduate degree, I was quite disappointed that it did not have the latest programming languages. This was almost 25 years back, and we did not have, in our course, we were not studying things like Java and .NET and web server technologies and servlets and all these things, which were all the rage and all the buzzwords. We were just studying humble C. And even to this day, I swear by C. It is the most fundamental programming language that anybody can study. And it has stood me in good stead over these years. I've studied microprocessors and compilers and humble languages like C. Focus on building the basic concepts and don't go by all the buzzwords, because these basic concepts will really, really help you. In 5 years or 10 years, we may not have ChatGPT, we may not even have generative AI, something new might come up, but you will always end up working with humans. You will always need to use these fundamental concepts too. So I really encourage everyone to focus on that. I'd grown up in the 1990s in India, and it's hard to give a sense of this massive sense of euphoria and optimism that was present almost 25 years back in India. I had just left my hometown to go to Bangalore in southern India. And I remember just being awestruck with all the technological developments and this massive sense of enthusiasm, this dream that everybody had of making a difference using computers. And you have to see it against the backdrop. When I was growing up in the late 80s and the early 90s, we only had one television channel. There was a basic functional telephone that my family had, but most families did not even have that. There was one single television channel. There was no internet. There were no smartphones. And things were really, really different back then. And to all of a sudden be on the verge of this massive boom in information technology, there was this huge, huge sense of enthusiasm and this sense that we could do something for ourselves and for our country. And I think India is at a similar stage now. For all those who are working in India and even abroad, I would really sort of hope that you use AI and sort of use these latest technologies and tools for betterment. My closing message is work with humans. AI is artificial intelligence, not artificial insanity, nor is it artificial stupidity. Focus on the basic concepts. Those will really, really help you. In the year 1798, the French Emperor Napoleon had led a massive campaign into Egypt. He ultimately wanted to come into Asia. His soldiers were really, really scared. They were in Egypt, standing in front of the pyramids, and his soldiers were really scared. In order to motivate them, he said the following words: "Think about it, soldiers. 40 centuries look down upon you." I have the same message for all the youth of India. Think about it. What you do today, people 40 centuries later will think about and really take inspiration from. 40 centuries look down upon you. It is up to you. It is incumbent on you, the future generation, to really do great things with AI, to really help better our country. Our Prime Minister has laid a very, very fundamental vision in front of us that by the year 2047, by within 100 years of independence, we will become a developed nation and we will have eliminated a lot of poverty and other ills that ail our society. It is really up to you to sort of do great things with AI, build new startups, build your entrepreneurship skills, do good with AI, and do good things for our country. And I wish you all the best for this. Thank you so much.